Testing, testing, mic check. Looks good to me. Okay, looking good. Getting ready for the live stream. Okay, I think I made it just in time.
Recording in progress.
sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and unmute. You'll probably need to mute so we don't get that feedback. All right. So this is the CryptoCannoneer live stream over here. So you might have seen me moving it around a little bit while Jay was doing the intro there. And then when we go to fire it, you can see it's all controlled through the Telegram chat. So we got to arm it first. And it gives us a little countdown. And then we can go ahead and launch tennis balls. So you currently showed the admin disarm, so this is a good opportunity for me to pull up the node red and show you how some of my admin controls work and give you a little showcase on the node red backend. So if you don't have an intro to cryptocurrency and node red yet, this is going to be a great place to start, and we'll be walking through a lot of the concepts and things that make all this work for the IoT and cryptocurrency side. So first let me pull up my Chrome here, and I will pull up the node red connection. So we did just change Wi-Fi networks in here, so I probably have a different IP address on my node red. So let's go ahead and walk through how we get the IP address. Actually, let me get my command prompt up and do ifconfig all ipconfig. Okay, so we've got our IP config here. Seeing disconnecting ipconfig all. There we go. Let's see, I'm just scrolling through my IP config, looking for that Raspberry Pi. So all of this IoT stuff that we're going to be showcasing is all running off of Node Red and Raspberry Pis. So those are really powerful for how cheap they are, and you can get a lot done, especially with small IoT devices like this. I'm just trying to find that Raspberry Pi. Sorry for the delay. People that are going to be watching this recording, you'll be able to fast forward. It's not showing me the Pi IP address. So let's try it another way. Let's try it just by logging right into the router. Dashboard. If it wants to play nice. Usually it would pop up an admin login. It doesn't want to do that either. Let's see here. Okay, well, how can we get the IP address for that Pi so that we can get logged into the node red? Well, there is one connection showing here. It isn't explicitly telling me that it's the Raspberry Pi, but we can try it. You can just see, so it's showing me here an address of 1.29. So we'll go ahead and just try that. So when you're trying to log into your Raspberry Pi, it's, or when you're just trying to log into Node Red, whether it's running on a Pi or not. You take the IP address, pull in 1880. We'll see. So that isn't it. That is some other device. It's probably my phone or something on that IP address. Let's see. Adapter, LAN connection. Okay, well, the easiest way to get the IP address is apparently going to be for me to hop onto the Pi real quick and just find it that way. So sometimes that's what you have to do. Give me just a moment and we will get that IP address and get this show on the road. So I am just pulling up command prompt on my Raspberry Pi now. I know you can't see it, but just grabbing that IP address real quick. We will get these flowing a little bit more smoothly. Bear with us for our first one here. And you know, we're experimenting with new setups and in this whole space, so everything here is highly experimental. And we will definitely be improving with time. I've got the wrong, so the ipconfig command works on Windows command prompt, but it's not liking me on the ifconfig is what I need on Linux. I'm relatively new to the Linux system, so you'll be learning right alongside me. I've just barely got enough Linux experience and knowledge to make this Raspberry Pi stuff work. That's the extent of all of my Linux experience. So let me just snap a picture of this real quick. So I'll have my IP addresses and then switch on back to you guys. Okay. Now that I have all the IP information for my Raspberry Pi, I should be able to get logged into the node red. Let's see. So I'm seeing the LAN, so it looks like here's just a view of that if you're curious what that command prompt looked like. And so now that I've got my IP, I can just go ahead and fill that in. Alright. Had to switch the keyboard between the machines. Okay, so it looks like the IP address that I need is 155. So, when you're using Node-RED, if you don't have an intro to Node-RED, there are a lot of great tutorials out there. I would just recommend Googling some intro to Node-RED. We will probably end up making a tutorial about it at some point. But here's what the Cannoneer flow looks like in Node-RED. So Node-RED, if you aren't familiar, it's a low-code, no-code programming interface, which makes it easier for visual programmers to create software. So I wouldn't consider myself a coder. I would say maybe at best I'm a programmer. Node-RED is the only way I know how to do any sort of back end. So what you see here when you're looking at this Node-RED flow is basically the programmatic diagram for how the software behind what the turret does works. So like right here, you see these are all my Telegram commands. This is what is actually listening to the Telegram chat. So when you put in a command into Telegram, like left or right, it's actually triggering this. So right here for left and right, you can see the flow. We'll start with up and down because that's actually a simpler one. So you can see the flow here. When someone puts in up or down, it checks it and makes sure that it's got the right payloads, and then it actually triggers the pins on the Raspberry Pi. And the Raspberry Pi is triggering the linear actuators that make the turret actually move. So if we backtrack a little bit to what I was just trying to show a little demo of, was that, you know, when we try to fire, I have admin disarms and admin controls in here to make sure that, you know, I've got safety checks and things like that. So before anyone can actually arm and fire the turret, I have to turn on the admin arm. So those are these two controls right here, which the flow is basically checking to make sure this admin function has been enabled. So we can start with an admin arm there, and then you can see I tried to make sure that each of my inputs and outputs actually produce something into the Telegram chat, so that if that's all you're watching, then you can actually see what is going on kind of on the back end. So you can see the Telegram put out the admin armed command, so now we should be able to actually fire. So let me turn off my screen share, or we can leave the screen share up, and there you go. So that's how this works. Currently it has to be manually reloaded. And so yeah, you just drop a tennis ball in, and that is sort of the overview right there of how some of this is working. Let me go ahead and pull up my schedule for this meeting so we can sort of start going in a little bit more of an organized fashion now that we got through that initial hiccup. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about was getting started with Node-RED and Stellar. So if you don't have a background in cryptocurrency and Stellar, there are a wealth of resources and information online. So I would just recommend starting on, you know, YouTube or whatever your preferred way to learn is, to start learning about, you know, private keys and secret keys, so you can get a basic understanding of how some of the back end in cryptocurrency works. Hopefully, I imagine we'll be doing a really beginner focused tutorial on the basics of cryptocurrency and key pairs at some point here in the future. But for now, for the purposes of this video, we'll assume that you understand key pairs and secret keys. And so then we will dive into some of the back end for Node-RED and specifically for Stellar. So let's see, let me hop over to the Zoom chat here. I'm going to put a link. So the easiest way to find the let me just move this down a little bit so that my bar stops blocking it. Oh, come on, do what I want. There we go. The Zoom bar just keeps blocking my tabs up there. So we will go to, or actually I can just use this browser to make things easier. No, that's not true. Okay, so we will go to my website, which is blockchaingerous.com, and I will drop a link in the chat here to the actual, and then we're going to go over to Stellar Red and Red Horizon. So I'm calling this Node-RED flow Stellar Red, you know, just a combination of Stellar and Node-RED, and then the actual back-end flow for this creates a wallet interface that you can use for working on the testnet and just general development tools for working with Stellar. So those development tools I'm calling Red Horizon. So here you'll find a nice little walkthrough on how to get started with my little Stellar Node-RED SDK. So I will copy this link over to the chat and put it in Zoom here. And then if you follow that link, it gives you this basic intro to this Node-RED flow. But as far as actually getting started with it goes, you're going to want to come down here to this post, Getting Started with Stellar Red. And this actually has a step-by-step, not quite step-by-step, it's a basic walkthrough of how to get started using this flow with Stellar. Another beginner tutorial I'm sure we'll be putting out in the future will be step-by-step how to get this installed and how to get started with it. And we'll do the basic walkthrough right now so that people can see, because this Raspberry Pi actually doesn't have this flow running on it yet. So we'll go ahead and get started. So when you get started with Stellar Red, you're going to want to go to the actual flow on the Node-RED library. So that's that link that I just clicked there. And so this is, you could either copy and paste this right into your Node-RED in order to get the flow going. So when you want to import a flow into Node-RED, sorry, my Zoom pop-ups here are blocking some of my buttons that I need. So you can import it into a new flow and you can just copy and paste it right in. And that is going to bring in a few flows because this SDK is a bit robust. There's just different tabs and different flows for creating different back-end elements for this flow. The primary one we're going to be focusing on is the testnet flow here. This just allows us to do basic things on the Stellar network. So from here, it actually won't work natively unless you install, it's not install, you just have to add a little bit, 2 lines into the settings file in your Node-RED, and that is explained here in the Getting Started with Stellar Red post, and I'll go through that in more detail in a different beginner's tutorial. But basically, yeah, you just have to add these 2 lines right here into your settings file, and this just allows the Node-RED to access the Stellar SDK so that it can perform all the functionality that we need. So this Raspberry Pi and this Node-RED install already has that code in there, so it should work. So now that we've got this imported, we're just going to go ahead and deploy it. And so this flow utilizes the dashboard functionality of Node-RED, which basically creates a little front-end UI for you, not accessible over the greater internet, but accessible on your local network. So once that has deployed, we will go ahead and access that. All you have to do to access that is the same thing that you did to access the Node-RED, pardon me, and then you're just going to do /UI at the end. That's how you get to your front-end user interface that you've built out with the dashboard node of Node-RED. So this Raspberry Pi is just compiling this and figuring it out. It is got a few. There it goes, successfully deployed. It takes a few seconds there because it's, like I said, there's a fair amount going on back there. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste that in and add the /UI so that we can get to our front end. So this is the front end that I built out and that is available as open source for that Node-RED SDK. So, like I said, this isn't going to be a super beginner-focused tutorial. If you don't know anything about cryptocurrency and wallets and key pairs, we will go into that at a later date. But if you are familiar with cryptocurrency wallets, this should look familiar. You can send transactions, you can get a public key from a secret key, and then so some of the unique features here that you might not be familiar with if you're not as familiar with Stellar as opposed to some other cryptocurrency networks, blockchain networks, DLT, whatever you want to call it. Stellar has native make offer functionality as a native decentralized exchange, so you can do that directly in the SDK. And Stellar also allows creation of custom tokens. That's what the whole basis is for the whole decentralized exchange. So you can send assets other than the native XLM lumens. A little bit else about this SDK and these development tools. So this interface here is useful for all sorts of things, from just moving assets between accounts to testing functionality. And then some of these other tabs here have some more robust functionality. So this generate key pair is going to be useful. This connects directly to the Stellar testnet, and it generates a new key pair, and it also accesses the Stellar friend bot, which automatically funds the key pair that was just created on testnet. And this key pair could be used as well on the mainnet. Obviously, I won't be using this key pair since the secret key is now public information on this recorded live stream. But if you weren't live streaming this, you would be able to use this key pair both on public and both on the testnet and on the public mainnet. So you can copy and paste this right here to see the actual block explorer for Stellar. So that's the key pair we just created, and you can see it's been funded with 10,000 test lumens on the testnet. And as you can see, we're on testnet. So that is where you can get started creating your own accounts. And then you can hop back over into the UI here, and you could take this secret key. I'm going to go ahead and just make a little note here of these keys so that I have them. I'm going to use 2 different accounts just to send a basic test transaction between the two. Let me just open up my notepad, and I will store this key so that when we make a new one, I can still access this one. As I'm working on this, it seems like a useful dev tool might be to create a little database right here that stores recently created keys so that you can just pop out new keys for doing testing. Alright, so here's our new account. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the testnet wallet and go ahead and put in that new secret key, and we'll use that first key pair that we created as our destination. And we'll just use a memo of hello. And how about we send them 5 test lumens. So we'll go ahead and that, and it's submitting to Stellar, and Stellar blocks complete every 5 seconds. So that's about how long a transaction takes. And then we can take this link right here. Don't need the success part. We just need that. And we can go ahead and copy and paste that over. I would love to figure out how to turn those into active hyperlinks. I haven't gotten quite that deep into the dashboard of Node-RED, and if that's feasible, we will ultimately be porting a lot of this over to a public UI on my website, but that is down the road. So yeah, as we can see here, we successfully transferred the 5XLM. So our original account now has the 10,000 lumens minus the 5 we sent minus the transaction fee, which on Stellar it's 0.00001 XLM. So I think lumens are floating around 25 cents these days. So you can accomplish, I think it's about 10,000 transactions for 1 lumen, or 1,000 transactions for a penny. So it's an extremely affordable way to do microtransactions and gaming, and that's one of the big reasons that I am personally developing on Stellar. So as you can see on this Block Explorer 2, you can look at the different accounts. So this is the account that sent it, and then it sent it to this account. And you can see this one has 10,005 lumens. So it has the 10,000 lumens from the friend bot and the 5 that we just transferred over. The reason we had to do the friend bot is that even though you can create a key pair on Stellar for free, the network won't actually register it as a funded account on the blockchain and on the ledger until it has at least 1 lumen in it. So that is how you create a testnet account using this Node-RED SDK. And then you can create custom assets and all sorts of things like that, and we will continue to walk through that. I'm just going to look at my schedule here, just make sure I'm staying on track. Yeah, so we're just basically doing a little rundown here of Stellar and this Red Horizon dev tools. This isn't explicitly related to Stellar, but this tab just gives you some pricing. This is accessing the Kraken API, just to tell you what's going on in the market right now. And then we can get into some of the more advanced functionality of this Red Horizon dev tools. So let's see, what's going to be the best way to talk about how tokens work on Stellar. Let's go back to the Block Explorer. So this is my personal favorite Block Explorer for Stellar. There's quite a few other options. This is just the one that I prefer, Stellar Expert. So you can see all these custom assets that people have created, specifically on the testnet. If we go over to the mainnet, we can see some of the more popular assets that are actually being traded and used on the Stellar network. One thing that Stellar is really passionate about is international remittances. So you can see a lot of various fiat currencies represented here. On Stellar, the way that the terminology that is used is that these would be called anchored tokens. So an anchored token on Stellar is one that represents something outside of the actual Stellar network. So for USD coin, that means that this USD token on Stellar is theoretically exchangeable for 1 actual USD in your bank account from this anchor, anchorusd.com. So if you trust AnchorUSD to actually give you $1 for every USD coin that you hold on the Stellar network, then you can